this and that. We don't know. And then a question was followed up in the audience. Well, why don't you know? Well, the choreographer didn't speak Italian and he didn't speak English, so we just repeated the moves. So they just didn't know. Which made me understand why the performance was like completely.
My experience, just throwing. We at Pavilion Dance, we do post-show talks after all of the work that comes in, but I facilitate them all. So, because I think it's really important, because it's not fair on the artist just to throw them in front of the audience and go, right, ask them some questions. And if you do that, it will fail more often. You need a bridge, which is what we think about for our organisation. Our whole organisation is a bridge between the audience or the context and the work. And so that sort of question, if I had been there, I would have softened it back up and facilitated it through in terms of then encouraging the artist to think about how the move felt or how the move worked in the context of the piece, rather than why you did it, because clearly that's embarrassing for the artist and confusing for the audience.
Because the project, we had this project was we do projects in schools, like upper primary school, and we were also very involved in how can we talk about dance, how can we talk about what the pupils have been working on during a day workshop. And also we needed to kind of structure it in some kind of way. We also need to, in a way, evaluate what they've been doing, but also in a way which wouldn't go straight from the art product, because it was not a kind of, it was a more process-oriented workshop, right? So, but then we also had to have some kind of way of structuring the conversation, and we didn't have the kind of, not a problem, but we didn't have a work of art which was had to be interpreted or
deconstructed.
Right, deconstructed. But how do you work if you work with schools? I expect you do. I mean, although the culture, creativity and education didn't get any funding from the Arts Council. but do you have conversations with primary school pupils about dance?
Yeah.
Right, all the time.
Yeah. I think the learning process is practice and reflection. Practice and reflection, and that is true if you're 7, as it is if you're a professional artist, I think. So it's that constant process of, why do you think we're doing this, or why does this work, or that looked great, didn't it, and what was it about it that made it good, what was the... So you're always actually talking in the same...
You are always
because
my experience is that they don't want to meet the dancers, they don't want to talk to
so the dancers are there too.
Yeah, okay.
But there's a mediation, because dancers aren't always trained facilitators or teachers, and you can't necessarily expect a dancer to be a king of all skills, and which is one of the challenges of this work, actually. That there is training, there is specialism to working in
Then
social
our challenge is that for you are, although you have a lot more people to cater for it, then you have a rather small region compared to us. We're just talking about Northern and Middle Norway, very large region. So when we are sending productions on tour, we can't afford sending other people than the dancers and the technicians. So if we are going to do that after tour, it has to be done by the dancers.
So maybe
there's no facilitator there.
So maybe that is about some training or some support through the rehearsal process, so that you consider the production as not only being the work on stage, but it's the after talk or whatever other elements that are to the offer. Because I think increasingly what we need to create are packages
Yeah.
offers, which are around the performance, but other things too. And then those dancers, because it's the same people, because of capacity, and need to have some training or some support as to how to manage those other parts. Otherwise, they won't work. So, because there is a skill to it. But that is really positive work for the dancers, to train them in those ways, because it gives them more opportunities then in their own career.
We also recently made a really nice project with, we worked together with the high school and asked the drama teacher she came in with a lot of students, and then they made an analysis in her class. So they took it out of our theatre, made the analysis, and then we were able to see their reflections. And one of the really eye-opening questions was, how did you feel your role as an analyst changed your perception of the performance? It wasn't formulated like that, but it was nice answers, because it suddenly opened them towards the meaning of talking and reflecting and engaging, and all of this suddenly fell into place, like, oh, okay, it makes sense to talk about it, but they felt it in themselves instead of having to try to find the right answer to somebody on stage.
And then those young people, when they see another piece of work, they have a different head space to be looking at it through, and that becomes really, really helpful. Because what you're doing is you are developing audiences. And that's because developing audiences isn't only about finding new ones; it's about encouraging audiences to be able to view and frame the work that they see, make sense of it within their own context. That's part of developing an audience's ability to be an audience, because it's not a passive thing. And I think sometimes we think too much about artists, makers doing things to audiences who are passive receivers. But the whole point of live performance is that we're all active in the room. That is what's special about it. And if we lose that, we've lost the key USP, the key unique element of what live work is. Because there are so many other competing platforms now, digital ones, that if we have to hang on to the thing that makes it us unique, which is the live experience of artist and audience in a room where anything could happen in the moment, and an audience is part of that.
Do you have any examples of like after talks or after shows where it also goes into some practical work with audience who just, they haven't necessarily followed a process, which has just come for one show? I mean, so to kind of switch into...
That's almost like lecture dem type, where you actually move into more of a kind of demonstration process, and you lecture dem type, which you can do actually, and some companies do that, either before or after their work. But I think an audience has to actively choose to want to do that. You can't just throw that on them.
No.
Oh, and now we're all going to try something. So that has to be because there is also a kind of unspoken contract you have with an audience, I think. And I speak as a venue manager now, and that contract is unwritten, but it's important because you're building trust, and if you betray their trust, they won't come back. Yeah, and that's why I think choosing work and being very careful about not throwing an audience something that they're not prepared for is quite dangerous for a venue. So contemporary art, contemporary dance, and artists making challenging work just need to be aware that for venues there has to be a sort of safety net for their audience somewhere. And depending on the nature of the venue, that safety net could be much smaller or bigger. So in urban areas where audiences are used to all sorts of things, that safety net can be very small, and you can take all sorts of risks. But in other areas, you have to be much more careful with your audience. So you can't just book work that is quite challenging without any support or context or frame. And worse still, if you misrepresent it in your publicity, which often happens because dance artists aren't always very good at explaining their work in a manner that is true to the experience of an audience, because they're so involved in the work themselves. They know what it is, but an audience experience isn't necessarily so. Anyway, we're off the subject.
Yeah, but I think we've been on the subject.
We've never been on the subject. We had a performance actually. It's running at the moment in northern Norway, which is quite a lot of audience participation. You don't sit in an ordinary seat. You move around and you dance. So quite a lot. Yeah, and in all publicity, it does say this is a performance with audience participation, but the dancers, they can inform us that quite often a member of the audience will come in saying, "Oh my God, am I supposed to take part?" And they say, "How clearly can we say it?"
Yeah, where's the safety net?
It does say audience participation all over the place. But that's frightening. Yeah.
But then you think from a completely different aspect that we have, like, I was working for the Bollywood Film Festival in Oslo, and they had workshops where people came and, I mean, they were really very excited about this because they knew that they were going to do something, but they don't know exactly what. I mean, but it's all about the expectations one has and what kind of form it is in it, and if it's kind of transgressing certain borders or not.
We had this isn't to do with participation, but it's to do with what I consider to be quite conceptual work, which we were presenting. A choreographer called Mayuri Bunam, who was presenting a piece of work which was a confusion of Bharatanatyam and contemporary performance, exploring the beginning of time.
Ooh!
Yeah, exactly. Exploring through bodies what it might have been like at the moment that the world began. So really conceptual, with quite a challenging style as well in terms of that fusion. And I had a group of 25 councillors and their friends, local political councillors, coming to see the show, who'd never seen any contemporary dance at all. They were coming to find out about us as an organisation. They'd chosen this one because the reason they'd chosen it was because Mayuri was a Royal Ballet associate. So they went, we'll go to that. And I was like, how are they going to cope? So I asked Mayuri to do a pre-show talk, and I said to the people organising this, I said, you must come to this talk, it will really help you the way you navigate through the work. And they were going, we're going for dinner first. And I said, no, it's really important.
You have to go.
And they were having dinner in the restaurant next door. I literally went in and they were still having their coffees. I'll bring your coffee too, come on. You must, I really needed it. And it was just 15 minutes, and again I facilitated, and Mayuri just explained a little bit about the context and what she was doing and why. And then they saw the show, and then they came to the post-show, and they all said, oh, it's so good to find out a little bit more. Because for that audience, they needed some way into the
Just a piece.
Yeah, and it was critical. That little intervention made all the difference to them, and they really appreciated it, because it's fantastic dance. I mean, they're brilliant dancers, but I was worried